Hey everybody, this is Sandra Zmala. I'm a political professional who's here to talk about my perspective on the news of the day and hopefully give you a little more perspective from this professional's perspective on why people are making the decisions they are and what they're doing from a little bit of the behind the scenes perspective. And I want to talk a little bit about an article that I'm reading this morning about Trump saying that there will be violence. I'm shortening things, but the short story is that Trump says there will be violence if Democrats take back the House in the elections coming up. I'm just going to go ahead and bring up the article for everyone to see here. Okay, so here it is on Fox News. There are a bunch of stories on this, but I'm reading the Fox News one. It's actually the Associated Press article that's posted on Fox News. The headline is Trump clarifies remarks about violence if Dems win in midterms. And this is, I think, the most interesting story because it's actually a second story written in response to the initial story about how Trump, in a meeting with leaders of evangelical Christian communities in the United States, said that there would be violence if the Democrats took back the House. So let's take a look at how this two-step article works. So it says President Donald Trump urged evangelical leaders this week to get out the vote ahead of the upcoming midterm elections and warned of violence by opponents if they fail. So the context here is that he is talking to people who he depends on, and the Republican Party, more importantly, depends on greatly to vote if they want to have a chance at keeping the House. So view everything through that lens, that this is about trying to win an election. Because Trump, I think, Democrats are really silly a lot of the time when we say that we say he's really stupid. I'm pretty sure that even if he's not saying it perfectly every time, he pretty much is being strategic most of the time when he makes public pronouncements, and I'll clarify what I mean by that. But this is a great example. So Trump made dire warnings at a White House dinner Monday evening attended by dozens of conservative Christian pastors, ministers, and supporters of his administration. Trump was stressing the stakes in November when he warned that if Democrats win, they will overturn everything we've done and they will do it quickly and violently, according to attendees in audio. He specifically mentioned self-described Antifa or anti-fascist groups, describing them as, quote, violent people. So that was the first story that he used this. He made a reference to Antifa, and he then linked that to policy, to Democrats overturning the accomplishments of what he views as accomplishments of him and the evangelical Christians who make up that hard core of his support at the voting booth. And so, first of all, I think it's very smart of him, just from a base political perspective, to bring this up, because even if he's not seriously trying to make any claim that there will just be like violence in the streets if the Democrats take back the House, which is, if you'll see later in the article, this is how a lot of the attendees and Trump himself treat this. They're saying, "Well, I wasn't being serious. I'm just, blah 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 blah," right? But just this is what Trump does a lot of the time. He is someone who's studied, it's very clear to me, he's studied linguistics, because he'll just bring up concepts that are evocative of emotion without any real serious backing, but just to make people start associating feelings with words. And this is a really, really good example, right? Elections, a lot of the time, are all about fear, and that's not like a ding on the politicians. I'm not even really judging the voters here. I'm saying that human nature is such that we react very, very strongly and take action. We're likely to take action if we feel insecure or afraid for ourselves. And so bringing up fear right now, because of all the stuff that Trump has been doing, Democrats, the voters across the country who vote for Democrats are very afraid already. So they are likely to come out and vote. And you've seen that bear out in patterns of all the voting that's happened so far this election cycle and in 2017 as well. It's not necessarily that conservatives are that they're down in terms of their voting patterns. It's more like there are Democrats who haven't been that engaged who all of a sudden are freaking out and willing to come out and vote and organize, do more than vote, who haven't really been doing that before. And so Trump is very clearly trying to create fear. And again, this is not I'm not denouncing what he's doing. I'm saying as a political tactic, it's very effective because fear is what drives action. All right, so putting that aside, so he made that initial statement that they're going to overturn everything we've done and they'll do it quickly and violently, right? And then you'll see in the next sentence here, asked Wednesday what he meant, right? So he did this in order to reach the people in the room with that message of you should be afraid. But and he gave, and I think there's something else to mention here. He gave them license now, because this is news, to start mentioning what many conservatives might view as, violent left-wing groups, whatever that means. He gave them license to start using that at the pulpit, right? So when these people are preaching, they're going to start talking about Antifa, and maybe they haven't had a reason to do that before. But now, because Donald Trump said it, and they were in the room with him, now there's a reason to bring this up with your congregation on Sunday, and that is a big deal, right? Because it politicizes the church at a very specific time when he needs it to be politicized. Trump needs church to be political right now, more than anybody else, more than any other time that's happened so far for him. So anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing that's important is that Trump knows that when he does stuff like this, when he evokes fear and tries to gin up fear, he knows that is going to cause people in the mainstream press who, more than anything, I know that a lot of conservatives like to say, oh, the press is so liberal, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's kind of crap in my mind. It's more like the press is part of an elite group who have conversations with elites all over the place, and they are often very comfortable in their lifestyle and therefore have the same concerns as both rich Republicans and rich Democrats. So they're not liberal. They're just hanging out with rich people a lot. And the chief concern of rich Americans is to protect their the system as it exists, because the system's benefited them greatly, and that's Republicans. There's a lot of super rich Republicans. If you talk about like right-wing billionaires, there's tons of them who are extremely politically active, and they're trying to protect their wealth and the system as it exists. And so are rich Democrats. So the stability of the system is at stake when Trump uses this kind of language, and it causes people who view the system as something that should be stable, right? That it should be stable. It's a good thing that the system has stability. It causes them to freak out. He knows that when he says stuff like this, it's going to freak out members of the press, because they know that the members of the press know that their audiences, and even more importantly, their colleagues and friends, the people they go to dinner parties with, etc., are going to also find this extremely disturbing. And so it's setting off alarm bells, and it's newsworthy in their minds. So the reporters are going to report on this, and then his message goes even farther. So this is a trap that he puts the press in all the time, and here's another great example of how this works. He says something that could be or could not be viewed as incendiary, as sort of on the edge, but really if you look at what he's doing and you have a sophisticated view of politics, of course it's incendiary. That's his point. He's trying to be incendiary. He's trying to cause controversy. And he knows that he's going to get a reaction out of him, which actually then moves the story further and makes sure that more people see what he said. He wanted as many evangelical Christians as possible to hear that he thinks there's going to be violence after the election if the Democrats win. So moving on with that tactical context in mind, asked Wednesday what he meant, Trump told reporters, "I just hope there won't be violence." So he's brought up the specter of violence to create this fear. He then says, "Well, I hope there's not violence. It's not me. I'm from favor of law and order, right? Law and order meaning protecting. Again, he uses these things to try to make it seem like he is uprooting the system, right? Like he wants to be seen as this outsider, but really what he's doing is he's protecting. He wants to create an excuse if there's a specter of violence and he's the president. He wants to create an excuse for him to be the law and order candidate, which means that he just protects specifically the rich people who fund the Republican Party. So it's if going back to what I was talking about before with the press, they are very informed and swimming very deeply in the communities of people who are elites in this country, and Trump is looking to protect certain elites from the masses and from liberal elites, right? He wants to protect wealthy conservatives, and the reason why it's important for him to do that is because they are his peers, and I suspect that one of the reasons why he ran for president in the first place was just to make these other wealthy Republicans view him with a little more respect, because they didn't respect him very much before, and he would constantly bring them projects. I remember hearing a rumor once that he was bringing a project to Goldman Sachs. He wanted to expand what he was doing with The Apprentice, and they told him, basically, GFY, get out of here, you're nobody. And he was trying to suck up, and it didn't work. And so instead he decided to run for president, and now the game's changed. He's changed his power relationship with other Republican billionaires. So anyway, he's saying here, I'm sorry for all these tangents, but this is just too much fun. He says, "I just hope there won't be violence," putting himself on the side of law and order after he himself raised the specter of violence. So he continues, "If you look at what happens, there's a lot of unnecessary violence all over the world, but also in this country, and I don't want to see it," Trump said. So here, with unnecessary violence all over the world, I think that he's bringing up this stuff that there are a lot of people in the right wing. There's like a coordinated thing going on right now where all of these people who are they tend to be on the conservative end, are raising a lot of fear over something that's happening in South Africa right now, where black South Africans are, I don't actually know a lot about this issue, but they're apparently repatriating land that was stolen by white colonists, lots of generations ago, is my understanding of the story, and so there's like a big freak out by white people in other countries that there's like an impending reckoning where the African descendants of Africa all over the world and in Africa are going to take back control and take power back from the people who screwed them over, generations ago. And so I can understand how this would be a freak out, but I think that that's what he's referencing obliquely. So he's not making it a specific reference, but for people who are already following that story, which is mostly right wingers, then there's like he's making that reference and bringing that fear forward even more. So then it moves into more other stuff, like about how he's trying to say that that Christians and conservative Christians are the backbone of the Republican Party, blah 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 blah, and that's sort of the rest of the article. So I'm going to bring it back to just me here talking. I think it's super important to just revisit this context here, that fear is the lifeblood of getting people to take action voting, and every political professional, if they're being honest, will tell you that is when the campaign starts closing and people are actually deciding what they're going to do, whether they're going to vote or not, and there's more attention coming to elections, you always want to have a current a storyline that evokes fear for the people you want to vote, and you want to have a positive storyline also, but that the negative storyline is like essential. It's such a big deal, and Trump's trying to set that up. He's doing a good job. He's speaking directly to the people he needs to vote, and he's creating fear because white evangelical Christians are the voting bloc that he needs to turn out. And it's tactically smart because the way he talks about it gets the mainstream press riled up, and makes them think that he is espousing violence, which he is. He's bringing it up, but also then he gets to back off and say, well, I'm not for violence. I hope it doesn't happen. But he's created this conversation, and it's crafty, and he does it all the time. And this is just one example. So just take a look at when he does things like this. Take a look at how he's setting this trap, baiting it, and then snapping it shut whenever anybody decides to react. I'm not suggesting that people, when he says stuff like this, if that freaks you out like it does me, I'm not suggesting, just play dumb or close your emotions off and ignore it, right? I'm not saying, normalize, like a lot of people are in the Democratic Party are like, don't normalize Trump. Sure, but also just when you have an emotional response to something that Trump says, take a step back and just take a breath and realize that, and steel yourself with resolve instead of acting on the negative emotion that he's created in you. Leave that to the conservatives. That's my advice to my fellow liberals. All right, well, so those are my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anybody out there who's watching this, I'm having so much fun recording these videos so far. I know not a lot of people are watching them yet, or maybe nobody will ever watch them, but I'm having a lot of fun recording, and I appreciate anybody who's sticking with me here. And if you have any comments, please write them out, and I will respond to them as soon as I can. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon. Bye.